Goblet of the Truth Index by Dr. Pleune, drpleune @gmail.com.
Counseling for change can be given by others, but each individual must take their own path. Chapter 23. Lines 151-176.
The actual truth of yourself is not anchored in the external authority, that is to say, ideology, but solely and alone in you yourselves, and indeed in that which you effectively are. Therefore, you shall consider that, if you fathom yourselves, you do not direct yourselves according to others, not according to an external authority, that is to say, not according to an external ideology, but only according to yourselves and according to what you truthfully are, and in all honesty want to be, and also strive to be. However, if you do not follow this guidance, then you will remain during the time of your life as human beings who live from the authority of others, and are subserviently dependent on them in debasing submissiveness. If you wish to change yourselves, human beings of earth, and if in doing so, you demand that you shall be told how you shall do this, then it may very well appear upright that you really want to do it. But that does not correspond to the truth, because truthfully you are being unhonest and do not want it, since you are calling for an external authority which is supposed to help you to achieve a new inner regulation of your inner nature. Therefore, you are hoping to attain a new individuality through it, and through its method, that is to say, its system. But this is truly not possible because only you yourselves can change yourselves fundamentally through your own motivation, initiative, and power. Therefore, you must also go your own way. An external authority is never able to change your inner nature, your individuality, and create a new inner regulation in yourselves, but truly only yourselves. However, an external attempt is made nevertheless to impose a new regulation of your inner nature, that is to say, your individuality, then an enormous chaos will inevitably arise in you, through which you are cast into dependency and confusion. This fact, you human beings of earth, is something to which you must respond with intellect and rationality, and recognize it as effective truth, so that you may understand that for your consciousness and for your inner nature, no other authority than your own comes into consideration. If you read and follow a book or other scripts, if you listen to a teacher, to your friends, parents, brothers and sisters, acquaintances, to the other partner in your partnership, whether man or woman, or to an authority, or to the society, etc., then this is already an outward and external authority by which you will be captured and made, dependent if you do not autonomously think through in yourselves what you have read and heard, and if you cannot in yourselves develop it into a valuable factor of the truth that is independent from the outside. But if you do not do this, then you will continue to live only according to a pattern and a pre-given formula, as you have done since time immemorial, through enslaving yourselves to an external authority and ideology. But if you really want to change yourselves in your consciousness and in your inner nature, and therefore also acquire a new and sound individuality for yourselves thereby, then you must ask yourselves how you can change to the good and better, and how you can create in yourselves a new authority that is your own, by means of which you then put an end for all time to any external as well as your own old authority, so that you are then only yourselves. In order to achieve this, however, you must change yourselves down to the roots of your inner nature and existence, as well as in your consciousness, which you must direct in its function into the right lines of right thoughts, out of which right and good feelings arise accordingly, through which you not only form your own psyche, but also influence your inner nature. And if you act in this wise, then you will no longer be dependent on any external tradition through which an enormous dependency, indolence and subservience is imposed upon you, which has ruled you since time immemorial. Therefore, always consider that you can never expect any help whatsoever from outside with regard to your inner developmental change, but that you can in every wise only help yourselves. What can be given to you from the outside through external authorities is no more and no less than a direction or teaching of what you actually have to do, that you simply must change yourselves to the better. However, the way, the method, or the system is something that you must find in yourselves, because this is a purely individual and therefore personal concern, since truly each human being is an individuum of their own, which has their own individual ways, methods, and systems in order to deal with both themselves and with the world around. Therefore there is no God, nothing God, no teacher, no dogma, no method and no system, no coercion, no cleric, no false or true prophet, and also no other human being or other external influence through which you could be shown an individual way to an inner developmental change in your inner nature and consciousness, because this individuality is only given in yourselves. If you only want, you can reject any external authority and only accept your own, and therefore truly only be yourselves, through which it arises that you no longer let yourselves be enmeshed in ideologies, philosophies and religions, and also that you no longer go in fear of gods, tin gods or demons, nor any of your fellow human beings, because if you finally recognize your own value, then you will not let yourselves be led any longer either through subservience, that is to say through submissiveness, or treated as a second-class human being and even bullied, but rather you place yourselves in your value on the same level with your fellow human beings, without, however, raising yourselves up over them. And when you are finally yourselves, then it will happen that you repudiate everything false that you as human beings have dragged around with yourselves for many generations, and truly when this happens then, an ever greater energy will grow in you, out of which more and more power will unfold, through which you will come to ever more greater and more extensive life capability, as well as to greater vital courage, which has inherent in itself very much more intensity, drive and vitality than can be entirely lived out. Therefore large reserves are always available, which can no longer run out. And once you have achieved this, and brought it to ample effect in yourselves, then you have liberated yourselves from the heaviest burden of your life, and have cast off from yourselves everything connected with external authorities, as well as the heavy weight of your own old and unworthy authority, which is now replaced through a new, powerful, and energy-rich one. Truly, the very realization of a great developmental change to the good and better is already in you if you become conscious that you have cast off everything that is old, valueless, and unsuitable, and through that have won very much more energy and power, by means of which there is no longer any fear in you whatsoever of committing errors, which you inevitably must commit, since it is only out of these that you can learn. The very fact alone that you no longer have any fear of acting rightly or wrongly creates a lot of energy and power in you, and this alone already represents a developmental change in you. Truly, you human beings of Earth, you require a huge amount of energy and power in order to lead your lives, but you waste a very great part of this power and energy through your anxieties. However, if you turn to the real truth and through this dissipate your anxieties and fear, as well as all the terrible things in yourselves consciously through intellect and rationality, then you will create new energy and power through this, which independently brings forth a radical inner upheaval and actual developmental change. However, always be conscious that you are left up to yourselves in all these things and endeavors of the inner developmental change, because if you are serious about your inner developmental change, as well as all the things that are connected with it, then, truly in this process of the serious inner developmental change, The status is given that you are actually alone with yourselves as human beings. In the process of your inner developmental change, you cannot expect help from any god or tin god, or from any human being, or from anything else. Because apart from yourselves, there is nothing that could carry out your inner change. If, however, you consciously carry out your inner developmental change through your energy and power, then you will no longer expect help from outside, from anyone, from any god, tin god, angel, saint, or demon, or from the deceased, because in the conscious developmental change that you bring about in yourselves, you are already free in yourselves, and are able to see what your developmental change brings you in terms of that which is good, better and positive. And consider, when you are free in yourselves, that there is also great energy and power in you. Besides the fact that nothing else can be done wrong with regard to the developmental change of the inner nature, and once there is freedom in you, then this has nothing to do with the defense, but rather with you being able to act rightly and freely, henceforth according to your own discretion, precisely because you are free in yourselves, and act out of the center of your changed inner nature, and therefore you no longer have any anxiety and fear, but are henceforth capable of creating true love in yourselves, and also living it out in yourselves to your fellow human beings, because when you have true love in you, then you can do in the right and the good what you want. And if you have created true love in yourselves, then out of this, the process arises that you get to know yourselves, and that you go in self-cognition in yourselves, which however in turn only happens through yourselves, but not through psychologists or psychiatrists, and not either through any other analysts, through philosophers or those who arrogantly assume that they can be of assistance to you in the self-cognition, although they are not capable of this. Therefore, you truthfully do not learn anything through them, and you cannot learn anything about yourself, but basically only about the one who wants to be helpful to you in the self-cognition. Truly, what your fellow human beings such as psychologists and philosophers, etc. can teach you is not what you are in yourselves, in your inner nature, that is to say in your individuality. Rather, they can only teach you your characteristics, your peculiarities that proceed out of your inner nature, but not however the individuality, the specialness and uniqueness, which go very far beyond the characteristics, and are connected to the innermost part of the inner nature, which is of pure spiritual nature, and belongs to the realm of the spirit form, in which the true love and the life are guided from out of the creational laws and recommendations. Therefore, self-cognition is not the same as self-cognition, and individuality is not the same as individuality, because truthfully both things must be separated in themselves. Indeed, on the one side in the material realm, which is outwardly expressed in you human beings, and that realm which only acts in the inner, so therefore it is necessary to speak of a material and outwardly directed self-cognition and individuality, and on the other side of an inner one, which really only acts through the power of the spirit form in the inner of the nature, and must be laboriously fathomed out, in order to let it have an effect in the exterior. Material self-cognition and individuality, fragment by fragment, gradually over the course of the life, as a result of which your being human in the real and true sense evolves over time. It is only through inner self-cognition, which must be fathomed in the core of your inner nature, that you experience and learn what you actually are in the inner of your own self, which is connected with the spirit realm, whereas that which is around the core corresponds to that part of the inner nature which is lived as individuality towards the outside and reflects the material character and the personality, out of which the behavior and the actions and effort are also determined. In the entire process, you must also look at and consider and bring forth a revolution of the consciousness, its thoughts as well as their feelings, and the thereout resulting psyche structure, which may no longer be dependent on an external authority. However, this process involves great difficulties, because what is important in the revolutionizing of the consciousness, thoughts, feelings, and the psyche, that is to say, the entire mental block is repudiating your own inner and demolished authority, in which are anchored all your unimportant perceptions, cognitions, cognizances, your pseudo-knowledge, your practical experiences, and the living of those experiences, as well as all your views, ideas, and ideals. Truly, during your lifetime, you had things, happenings, and experiences that have taught you something, but you have raised up all that, which you have learned to a new authority in you, by which you are ruled, and which has just as great a destructive effect in you as an authority which is already thousands of years old.